is uh, which is concentrated on clinical consulting or coaching practice, those who are interested to go to those fields. We are very excited to co-host this event by our very own GSEP, Career Services, Alumni Relations, and ELC, which is a student service group. I'm also very excited we are very excited to partner up with Simple Practice to present you this series. Simple Practice is a leading cloud-based practice management software for more than 92,000 private practice practitioners. Now I'll be handing to Ben Cladwell. He's the Educational Director for Simple Practice and his team. Thank you.
Thank you, Parsa, and thanks everybody for taking the time out of your day to join us today. Again, I'm Ben Caldwell. I'm the Education Director for Simple Practice Learning, and I'm proud to say that one of the numbers in that introduction is officially outdated now. We're now the practice management software of choice for 100,000 practitioners, which I think is a kind of mind-blowing number. But we're here today to talk about building your own business. You know, what we exist to do at Simple Practice is make it easier for practitioners to build their own businesses and be successful at their own businesses. So we're focusing really on that business side of things today. For those of you who were with us last time around, you may remember that we talked kind of in big picture terms about getting your mindset ready for business launching and business building, making sure that you had the knowledge that you would need to have about your population, about anything else to overcome some of the barriers that you saw that might be in your way. So today we're going to get a little bit more granular, and we're going to talk about setting up the framework for your business, talking about the services that you provide, who you provide them for in very specific terms. And we're going to talk about some tools along the way. So we'll talk about business plans. We'll talk about what's called a SWOT analysis, which is a very helpful way of getting things started. So the whole idea here is about becoming a successful entrepreneur, regardless of the particular kind of business that you are building. My own work historically is as a therapist, so I tend to talk in clinical terms as a therapist, but all the principles that we're talking about today really apply to the beginnings of any kind of business, serving any kind of a population. Our agenda here is a little bit loose in terms of time frames. I want to make sure we have time to get all of the key information in. We're in the introduction part right now, of course. We'll spend about the next 10 minutes doing a visualization exercise on identifying your target market. And for that, you will need some paper and a pen close by. If you don't have them near you already, I would encourage you to get some. And I always have this reaction when I'm by a computer for an event like this. Well, can't I just type? You will see in a moment that for a particular part of that exercise, typing's not going to work. So please do have some paper and a pen close by. We'll talk about some common anxieties. We had a lot of folks mention in response to our last event that in the breakout sessions and in discussions afterward, that one of the big concerns people feel around starting their own business is imposter syndrome. And so we'll talk in pretty specific terms today about ways that you can identify and address that, as well as some other common anxieties of folks who are starting out. We will take about 15 minutes for breakout sessions where you can get some additional information about your target market that I hope will be very useful and tangible to you. And then the last segment, hang out for it because it's going to be well worth your while. That's where we're going to dive into the business plan and SWOT analysis, those documents that can help you secure funding if you're interested in securing funding for your business, or if you're self-funding, can help you to be really certain that you have a product or service that fits with the market that you are intending to serve and offers real value for that market. I think the kinds of analyses that go into those documents are really critically important. And I'll even give you a kind of embarrassing example of something that I failed at doing, that had I done that kind of analysis ahead of time, I might not have failed with. So it's a pretty full hour today. Let's go ahead and get started with the, oh, you know me already. with the folks who are here from Simple Practice who are going to be helping out in the breakout rooms. First, we have Amber Eddings. Amber, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Ben. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Amber. It's on the screen. I am a customer onboarding specialist at Simple Practice. I've been with the company since 2018, and I am also working my way through the clinical psychology program at Pepperdine. So I'm also a peer and just very happy to be here.
Thank you, Amber. You see, Mariana Barajas is with us as well, an associate professional clinical counselor, as well as being on the Simple Practice team. Mariana, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mariana, and I received my master's in counseling from Loyola Marymount. Also, before starting at Simple Practice, I worked as an intern and then an associate at a nonprofit focused on family reunification. And now at Simple Practice, I'm a onboarding specialist. So I help group practices and also help with troubleshooting along the way.
Thank you, Mariana. And lastly, we have Dr. Jameson Morell. Jameson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jameson. I am a psychologist as well as a customer success education and quality specialist at Simple Practice. That basically means that I help onboard our new team members and help them learn how to use our product and how to help our customers. Very excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Jameson. And these folks are going to be here helping out in the breakout rooms when we do those exercises in a little bit, just kind of as facilitators to make sure that the conversation is running as it should. Simple Practice, as we mentioned, is now trusted by more than 100,000 practitioners, and it includes a whole suite of features for practice management, including billing, scheduling, secure communications, and on, all within a secure and HIPAA-compliant framework. Let's talk about identifying your target market. As you are building a product or service, building a business, who is it that you are intending to serve? And for this, we have a little visualization exercise. So if you have a paper and pen, please bring those close by. So I want to tell you about and I know this is a weird way to start, but I promise it's going to connect. So in my family, when we get together for the holidays, we play a drinking game. And the drinking game is called 5-Second Animals. And the intention is that whoever is running that round will announce a particular animal, sometimes doing a thing, that everyone is supposed to draw in 5 seconds. As you can imagine, that is a challenge. Here, let's do an example. In 5 seconds, can you draw a duck eating a cheeseburger? Okay, that was a generous 5 seconds. Go ahead and stop. And if you are so brave, could you hold up to the camera, if you are on camera, the drawing that you have? Carl, very nice. That's one of the better ones I've seen. Heidi, well done. Good, good. Shay, I like it. I like it. Excellent. So you can see the challenge here is that you have to do something that communicates the idea very quickly and efficiently. Because you could go to great lengths to explain what's happening in your picture, but if you have to explain, then it probably doesn't communicate the idea very well. The same idea holds when we are talking about the businesses that we are building, when we're talking about what we do and who we serve. We want to be able to nail down those things in ways that are very specific and understandable very quickly. So if I ask you, for example, what do you do? A lot of people who are in the therapy world will say, well, I'm a therapist. That's fine. That's who you are. That's not what you do. The thing that you do is you help a certain group of people in a certain very specific way. And so I would encourage you to spend time taking kind of a 5-second animal approach to what exactly do I do? Can I narrow that down to really just a few words so I know how to best communicate that? You know, in my case, my clinical specialty for years was working with couples. So when people asked what I did, I would say, I help couples who are trying to figure out whether to stay together. Right? That is very clear and specific about what I do. My license is as a marriage and family therapist, but what I do is help couples figure out whether to stay together or not. So One part is what you do, what product or service you offer. The other part is the group of people that you are offering that service to. And for this, I want to brainstorm with you a little bit in ways that you'll take notes on specific to your own situation, the business or practice that you are trying to build. So when you think about who you're serving and how you're serving them, I want you to first think about what you do uniquely well. What are strengths that you have that you bring to this business that you are building that other people who might even be serving the same population in the same area may not have? If you're a licensed professional, having a license is great, but there are lots of licensed professionals around. What's unique to you? What strengths do you bring? Jot down maybe just 3 or 4 of those. And again, the fewer words here, the better. What do you do uniquely well? And I will tell you, depending on where you are in town, as you think about your business, one of the things that you might do uniquely well related to competitors is that you might offer free parking. Why would somebody go to you instead of the person offering the same service down the hall or down the street? If you've got a couple or 3 of those things, Sophia says, providing medical kits to society. I love it. If you've got a couple or 3 of those things, then let's talk about actually the group of people you are aiming to get the message out to. And I will tell you, in the world of telehealth that has emerged over the past year, this has actually gotten a little bit more complicated because now you have some people who are intending to serve a local area, some people who are intending to serve their entire state in which they're licensed, and other folks who are doing coaching and consulting who are wanting to serve a certain kind of client no matter where they are in the world. Any of those are fine, but we need to think about your market in terms of a range that we can draw a circle around. How do you differentiate who you're trying to sell something to from who you are not interested in selling something to? So for me in the clinical world, it's not just couples in distress, because lots of clinicians serve couples in distress. I was looking for couples in distress who were in the geographic area where they could come to my office and, bluntly, who could afford my fee in private practice. I'm not cheap to work with. I didn't work with insurance. So how could I draw a circle around that particular group? So some of the kinds of questions that you might ask about your sort of target or ideal client, and then you can expand outwardly from there. If you think about the perfect person or the perfect family for your business, the ideal one you are trying to serve, how old are they? How much money do they make? Where do they live? I like thinking about this for a minute to even expand a little bit further. If you can start to get a picture of that ideal client in your mind, understanding we're doing this to help you sort of hone your business building, not to unilaterally impose limits, but if you can get a picture of that kind of ideal client, what kind of a place do they live in? Do they live in a house, an apartment? Do they live in a condo? Do they have 1 car, 2 cars? They use public transportation? Do they have kids? Where are they in terms of their stage of life? And is that stage of life related to the products or services that you offer? Aside from the problem that you are trying to help them solve, what other struggles do they have? What are their sort of pain points in life? I worked with a lot of couples who, yes, they had couple relationship needs, but they also had financial struggles because they were in a situation. I mean, like I said, I'm expensive, but a lot of the couples I was working with were struggling with finances in multiple areas, and they were buying expensive things like expensive therapists, but also finding themselves really struggling to keep up. So one of the things that I found I had to have in my back pocket was a referral to a financial advisor. What kinds of friends do they have, your ideal client? What's their social circle like? The reason why all of this stuff matters is because when you are putting out into the world messaging about who you are and what you do, when you are building awareness, what marketers would call sort of the top of the funnel marketing stuff, you can waste a lot of energy and you can waste a lot of money by getting your message out to people who are not actually relevant to what you're trying to build. A great example of this, I love the LA Times. I'm a reader of the LA Times. For the overwhelming majority of businesses that you might be trying to build, the LA Times is not a great place to advertise, because if you put a full page ad in the LA Times, you're going to reach a big population of people, most of whom are outside of your target market. And so that is not necessarily money well spent. You want to make sure that your face, your company, your message is in front of the people you are wanting to reach when they need you. And one way you do that is by getting your message out to their friends, to their social circles, so that they can say, hey, have you heard of so-and-so? They offer this thing that sounds like exactly what you. So you can take this exercise and continue to build on it. Where I would like you to ultimately land is being able to say in really as few words as possible, in that duck eating a cheeseburger kind of way, I do blank for blank. I provide a certain product or service for a specific group of people or type of organization or whatever else your population may be. Those two things, what you have to offer and who you have to offer it to, are critical components of an effective business plan. If you're seeking funding from outsiders in any way, the first things they're going to ask are, what are you selling and who are you selling it to? You can spend more time with each of these exercises if you'd like to, both the uniqueness of your work and also the population that you are trying to serve. I really like, actually, and I've done this where like this exercise is the entire workshop, of really having folks visualize, okay, walk me through that ideal client's day. What do they do from the time they get up in the morning to the time they go to bed at night? And part of that is, where do they encounter messaging? Where do they encounter possibly a message from you about the service that you offer that they really in fact need right then? Because that might guide you in terms of, if you want to advertise, where to advertise. If you want to build a website, building a website's great, but it's kind of like putting up a storefront. If nobody knows it's there, that doesn't help you very much. So, what are you going to do in terms of search traffic? If you're interested in doing some media opportunities, what publications does your ideal client read? How can you get in front of them in that way? Does that all make sense so far? All right, excellent. I want to go into some common anxieties that people have. Some of these were voiced to us last time in those small groups, and some of them are things we've heard about from other channels. One of the things we most often hear about from people who are building a business is this idea of imposter syndrome, that you don't belong in a particular group doing a particular thing, that you somehow don't deserve to be there. I will tell you that my own perspective on this has shifted a little bit over time. I used to see it as fundamentally an anxiety-driven thing, where it's an individual issue for individuals to work out on their own through, the cognitive stuff that you might do around any other anxiety, through going to therapy if you need to go to therapy. I don't see this quite the same way now, especially if you are a woman, and especially if you are not white. And the reason why I say that is I've heard a couple of very powerful interviews in the past year. We actually did a session for our upcoming Simple Practice conference, Simple Summit, that was about race in mental health care, where professionals who were non-white talked about the experience of being in predominantly white spaces and how those spaces sometimes through what you might think of as sort of benign neglect, and sometimes through very intentional structuring, we're structured in such a way as to make them feel unwelcome. So I think some of it is that, yes, we have anxiety when we're trying something new. And yes, there is anxiety stuff for us to work on there. Some of it, too, can be structures that have been for a long time unwelcoming unless you were sort of in the in group, whatever the in group happened to be. And so I take a little more of a confrontational stance to it now, where my hope for you is not just overcoming anxiety if you experience imposter syndrome, but also that you can have a little bit of pride in the fight of, no, I absolutely belong here. And if anybody's going to try to tell me otherwise, then, F them. I'm going to show you that I belong here, that I have every right to be here, and that no one has a right to make me feel unwelcome. We have an article on Pollen, the Simple Practice magazine, about imposter syndrome that I wrote a couple of years ago. And it talks about ways that you can overcome it. And one way is just accepting that imposter syndrome is natural when you're doing something new, when you're trying something that you haven't tried before, or when you're in a group of people that you haven't been in before. Like it's natural to feel like, okay, what am I doing here? Is this the right kind of crowd for me? And that's not something that you should take as truth of non-belonging, but rather you should just accept this is a normal anxious response. This is a normal way of like assessing safety and assessing, what is this group actually like? As you learn to become a clinician, you have the experience of imposter syndrome a lot because you're sort of putting on the hat of a clinician. Your whole education is about how can you behave differently so that you can work in this particular role. And then it's only over time that you integrate that different behavior with your personal nature in such a way that it feels very natural to act in this therapist role. So as you're building a business, the same kind of thing applies. You start to figure out the ways in which you need to act differently as a business owner, the ways you need to act differently as a manager. And if that is unfamiliar to you, of course, you might, as you're starting out, feel a little bit like an imposter. That's not a reason not to do it, nor does it mean that you actually are an imposter. Rather, it just means that a new role demands some new behaviors out of you. The experience of imposter syndrome is incredibly common, so common that I have never, ever, 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 ever met a therapist or a business owner in any capacity who did not experience some form of imposter syndrome, right? It's the norm, it's not the exception. So if you feel this as a potential barrier in kind of getting your business off the ground, then it's the kind of thing where like everybody's nervous the first day of school, right? It's not just you. Everyone is in this situation. You can do all the individual stuff to make yourself feel more at home. You also can help and uplift those others who are in similar situations, also trying to build a business, also starting out in this new, and also experiencing the exact same kind of fear. Speaking of fears, people often tell us that they fear failure, that their new business is not going to work. And that is a real risk. If you invest money in building a business and it fails, you may be out that money. So I don't want to pretend that that is not a thing. It is a thing. It's tangible. You are taking a risk when you start a business. And hopefully you have a family and a support system who is 100% on board with that risk. If you don't, it certainly gets a lot harder. Rather than denying or ignoring the genuine risk that's involved, I would encourage you to think about the consequences of failure versus the consequences of not trying. Consequence of failure could be that, yeah, there is time and money and heartache that goes into a business that ultimately doesn't work. The consequence of not trying is that you will always wonder. I would far rather try and fail than always wonder. I do believe that failure is a gift. I think that you can learn from failure. That's not to say that it's easy or that you ought to be happy about failing. I don't know anybody who is happy about failing, but just that you can get a lot out of it. I've written a few books. One of the first books that I wrote was this book, Ranking Family Therapy Programs in California. It was an overwhelming failure. I think we sold in the entire life of this book less than 100 copies, maybe far less than 100 copies. I'll get back to talking about why, but I like to hold that up as an example because that taught me an awful lot about writing and publication, where, yeah, that book failed. And ones that I've done since then have succeeded in large part because of what I learned from that failure. People sometimes worry about being under or unqualified, and that can be an internal concern about, like, I don't feel like I know enough to do what I need to do to make this work, or external, like the world is not going to take me seriously in this role as a business owner. I had some of that external concern initially as a therapist because I started seeing clients in 1999, at which time I was a solid 23 years old and looked meaningfully younger than that. Now, time, of course, solves that problem. But at that time, when I was 23, I was concerned that clients would not take me seriously. Clients didn't care. And they don't tend to care about your degrees or your licenses. And with other kinds of businesses, customers don't tend to care. They care about whether you can help them. And if there is evidence in front of them that you can help them, that you can solve their problem in whatever particular way, then they will embrace you. They will embrace your business. They will buy the product or service that you have to offer. So rather than being so focused on is someone going to take me seriously as the person owning this business, you may want to focus instead on the value proposition that you offer. I don't know if you all know Mercedes Samudio. She's a social worker, if I recall correctly. She's based in Orange County. She put together this fantastic conference, Diversity in Parenting, a few years ago, and she has a book on shame-proof parenting, and that's kind of her message to the world. She's done a great job building that out and spreading that message. And while it's true that you need a professional license to do some things, a lot of things like writing that book or sharing a message on shame-proof parenting, you don't need a degree to do. You don't need a license to do. Those are things that kind of look better after your name. Man, if you've got a message for the world, there is no reason to wait for it. You can write a book whenever you want. You can build a website whenever you want. You can build a business pretty much whenever you want, as long as you've got the resources to be able to do it. So if you are concerned that you are underqualified to do a particular thing, I'm more interested in, are you able to offer the product or service or message that you are wanting to offer? Because if you're able to offer it, then the other stuff, the letters after your name, don't really matter. I do think if you have these or other common anxieties, that a good solution is to get some structured support. We talked last time about the benefit of hiring expertise if there are things that you don't know very well. Getting mentoring, either formally or informally. If you know somebody who's got a successful business that is in some way similar to the business that you're trying to build, by all means, take them out for coffee, take them out for lunch. See if you can do a Zoom date for a donut over video conferencing, and connect with them, see what worked for them, what didn't work for them. I have been routinely surprised, in a very good way, at the generosity that business owners often have, that folks provided to me early on, that I now try to provide to other people in terms of guidance that can help people avoid some common mistakes and build a really successful business. I do think it's important to have regular accountability, and sometimes that means just connecting with other folks trying to build a business to talk about your shared successes and struggles. Part of that also is about having benchmarks. This idea that, okay, by such and such a time, my business will be at this specific place, this number of dollars in sales, or this number of products available, or this particular population served. It doesn't mean that if you hit that time and you haven't hit that benchmark, therefore throw up your hands and give up. What it means instead is that if you hit that time and haven't hit the benchmark, take a good close look at your planning and your structure and see where you need to change course. And in this sense, it's not really different from like treatment planning, where if you've got clear and specific treatment goals for a client, they don't hit those goals by the intended timeline. Well, then you revisit the treatment plan and say, are the goals wrong? Are our methods wrong? Or do we need to make some other kind of change? That all make sense? All right. We now are going to go into that small group discussion that I mentioned earlier. This is the kind of thing where hopefully your small group can offer you some very specific and tangible benefit. Like I said, hang out after the small group stuff because we're going to talk about business plans and SWOT analysis after the small group discussion. In this discussion, I want you to think back to your identified product and population, right? So I want to provide blank product or service to blank group of people. To the degree that you have that nailed down and are comfortable doing so, I want you to share that with your small group and then ask that small group, tell me something I don't know or wouldn't expect about that audience. And my hope here, we've got a group size that allows for, I think we'll do our breakout rooms will be about 20 in each room. So if we do it pretty rapid fire format, that's enough time for as many people as want to hear back maybe 2 or 3 things that you don't know or wouldn't expect about that particular audience. The intention here is to be really helpful to one another. So I mentioned that the clinical population that I served earlier, I'm an expensive therapist, but people are also often having money struggles. Well, that's the kind of thing that going into serving that population, I wouldn't have anticipated. So help each other out to the degree that you can. Ask questions to the degree that you can. Our simple practice folks will be there to facilitate, and I will bounce around a little bit from one small group to another. We will come back at a little bit after a quarter till, so like between a quarter till and 10 till, so that we can go over the business plan and SWOT analysis stuff. Maggie, are you throwing everybody into the breakout rooms?
Yep, ready now.
All right, I will be floating through those rooms. I'll see you there. All right, I think we've got everybody back. I had the chance to listen in a little bit on each of the breakout rooms, and there was great discussion happening in all 3 of them. So thank you to everybody who offered guidance or who was brave enough to kind of put forward your statement of intent in terms of your business, even if it's not totally set in stone yet. And just about that, of course, it's something that will iterate and evolve over time, especially while you're in the planning process. And I would encourage you even, if you've got a couple of different versions of hold on, I'll find it, of this one. If you've got a couple of different versions of this, run them by people who are not necessarily in the same world as you. See whether it makes sense. See whether it resonates with them. Sometimes we get more interested in the technical accuracy of this kind of a statement instead of its emotional resonance, its punch with our audience. And so, hopefully you'll wind up at a place that's got both, that is a good, clear, and specific statement of what you do and who you do it for, and also that hits people in a way that really does resonate, that they think, oh my gosh, I would know for sure if I was in that group needing your service, and if I was, I would be coming to you for it. So I want to talk about a couple of very tactical resources before we call it a day here. The first is the business plan. Now, obviously, in the time that we have, we're not going to walk through the entirety of a business plan in huge detail, but I do want to run through some of the sections of it in just a minute. And I want to guide you to the Small Business Administration. They have a page that's got a couple of different formats for business plans that I really, really like. So you can see the link here, and we'll also make sure this is available to everybody. But the link there takes you to a page where they talk about 2 different kinds of business plans. One is sort of the standard traditional business plan. It's longer in form. It is a detailed explanation of how you are intending to get from point A, which is here now today, to point B. where your business is successful. It is doing what you have set out to do. The time frame for these varies a little bit by plan, but it's usually 3 to 5 years. The other format that they offer is more of what they describe as a startup format, where you might have more of an idea than an actual sort of begun business. That idea is put onto paper in a way that you can sort of gauge interest for it, and in some cases seek external funding to help make your idea happen. And the startup format is necessarily a little bit less granular and more idealistic. It's where you've identified a particular need and you think you know a really good way to meet that need, and you're hoping that other people will agree with you so that they will fund your business. Either one of those can be really, really helpful. Some of the key components of a business plan. You start with what the business is and what problems it solves. Now, your mission statement, if you've ever worked on a mission statement, is part of that, but the description should go into a little more detail. What exactly is this business in terms of structure, in terms of people, in terms of location, things like that, that wouldn't necessarily go into a mission statement, but are very relevant to whether your business is likely to succeed or fail. You then will include some market analysis. Is anybody else already offering a similar kind of product or service to a similar or overlapping population? If so, that doesn't mean that therefore you shouldn't do your business, but rather that you need to spell out what competitive advantages you would have that other folks in that business wouldn't necessarily have. And that is where we get to the SWOT analysis, and that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'll talk about that more in just a moment. You go to your organization, your legal and personnel structure, right? How exactly are you intending to build this? And if you're starting from scratch, you might be, 1 or 2 people right now, and that's fine. That's not a point against your business. If anything, that means that you can start out lean in terms of expenses as you are building. But even things like, what kind of corporate structure do you have? Are you a sole proprietorship? Are you an LLC? That kind of thing is relevant. Specifically, what do you offer? Specifically, who are you trying to reach with that offering? And the marketing plan would include how you are intending to reach them. And then financial projections. How much do you think you'll spend? How much do you think you'll bring in a particular time horizon? A financial projection is not quite as specific as a budget. We talked about that a little bit last time. A budget is usually for the next 12 or 18 months. Financial projections can go out a little bit farther, and everybody understands that projections are just projections. They are speculative and that they may change. I mentioned that SWOT analysis. This is, I think, one of the most important tools when it comes to getting a business off the ground. You need to think really carefully and specifically about what you do uniquely well that gives you a competitive edge, where your competitors might have an advantage over you. And partly that's just from name recognition if they've been around longer. If they have a big staff, then they've got some more personnel resources than you do. Do they have a lot of money? Do they have sponsorship or other corporate kinds of connections? With those weaknesses, then you ought to think about, are those weaknesses in my business ones that I should sort of accept or ones that I should fix? Because you can accept a certain amount of weakness and just say, well, that's fine because my business is over here. There are also weaknesses that can turn into real dangers for your business if not addressed. For opportunities, what markets are being unserved or underserved? And I will tell you what I heard in those small group discussions was a great deal of interest in serving populations that are unserved or underserved in terms of location, in terms of demographics, in terms of mental health needs, etc. If that is an opportunity, spell that out. Say, listen, nobody else is doing this in the way that I would like to do it. How can you expand and grow your business over time? So how might your audience grow? How might your product or service line grow if you're successful? And then lastly, threats. What are the most tangible risks to your business? So With the books that I write, somebody else could come in and write a similar book and sell it for less money, right? One of the threats in many different kinds of businesses is that there is a low bar to entry because of the internet. I mentioned earlier this book on California family therapy program rankings that was a terrible failure. And the reason why it was a terrible failure, I still think it was a good book. I still am happy that I did it. It was a way of trying to put together a whole bunch of data about family therapy programs that really wasn't centralized before, and make it useful to people who are trying to choose a program to attend. The thing that I didn't do that I should have done was exactly this kind of an analysis, a SWOT analysis, because if I had, I would have identified, number one, that there is a very limited market for a book like this, and number two, that the data that I was using wasn't proprietary. It was all public information. I was gathering it and presenting it in a new way, but the data itself, I didn't have any ownership of. And so somebody else who I actually very much like and respect and have worked with in a couple of different ways since then, took some of the same information along with some additional information that they gathered and made it into a website that it was a free resource for anyone, that was frankly better than what's in here because it was more detailed and could be more regularly updated. Had I done a SWOT analysis ahead of time, I would have identified that threat and considered, okay, what do I need to do to make this a better, more unique resource that would make it more desirable for its audience? So as much as possible in this kind of an analysis, you want to be very specific because that will guide your business planning going forward. It leads to some very natural decision-making about building your business. That was a lot. Are there questions that folks have that I can address in the next 2 minutes or so? And I say this also from the backdrop of, if there are questions that I can answer for you that we don't get to today, please feel free to shoot me an email individually. I am easy to find. I am ben.c@simplepractice.com. And I'll be happy to offer help where I can, or if I don't have knowledge that would be helpful to you, then I can guide you as best I can to folks who would. But if you have any immediate questions for right now, you can put those in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to connect with me afterward. And for all the folks here from Pepperdine, thank you so much. I love these discussions, and I really hope that it's helpful to everybody here. Oh, I almost forgot. One thing I want to add, we've got all these Simple Practice resources. By all means, check out Pollen Magazine, Monarch, and Simple Practice Learning. And we do have the one remaining session that's on June 10th, also at noon. So we hope to see you again then. Anything else, Pepperdine folks, that we need to throw in here?
No, thank you. That was great. Once again, Ben, there's a question about, are we able to access these slides? And we are recording this session. So we'll upload that to our shared drive, and I will put that in the chat, and we'll also follow up regarding that as well. So here is a link to our shared drive, and you'll find the first recording, this recording once it's downloaded, as well as the resources that were shared last time. So thank you. Thank you again to our partners at Simple Practice, and thanks everyone for attending today. I heard great discussion, not only in terms of exchanging information, but just networking and supporting one another. So see you in June.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.